As you can see, I'm currently on a ski break, enjoying some family time, and usually I make it a point to completely unplug, and stay in the moment during trips like this. But I just got a text message, that I felt I had to share or I wanted to share, and it's from the founder of a French company, a French startup I've been working with to help them with their Series A funding. And he just confirmed by text that everything is now officially locked in. So they've officially secured 5.2 million euros in funding. And I'm really thrilled for them. But at the same time, it's also like a rewarding feeling, you could say, to see all the hard work and all the hours that we put in to pay off. And let me be clear when I say this, it's not just about me. Of course, I like to think that I've been a contributing factor to that success, but they're also really an incredible team and with a brilliant vision. So, anyways, all of this got me thinking while I was skiing down that slope. Why not take a few minutes? I can use the pause and also and the view to share with you everything I've learned about raising money in Europe, especially because Europe is not the US. It's a completely different market. So whether you are a founder, an investor, or maybe just curious about the process, I think you will probably find these insights quite valuable. Maybe just to start with, especially in the startup world, and in this case we're talking about fintech, so it's a startup world. You are dealing with investors who generally don't have the same, how would you call it, risk aversion as more conservative investors. A conservative investor looking for a steady 5% return per year. And let's be real, it's extremely hard to find risk capital from conservative investors. So, with that in mind, as a context, the founding team and I, we spent a lot of time thinking about the strategy. How are we going to get that? What's the strategy to get that risk capital? And here's the thing, fundraising becomes so much easier when you truly understand concepts like optionality and upside. Now, it may sound technical, but the idea of optionality is pretty straightforward to understand. Optionality is when you say, okay, if I invest in this, the potential upside is so much bigger than the downside that I cannot not invest. Why? Because sure, in that context, I might lose this much, but the potential upside, it's unlimited, or I don't even know how much I could win. And so what happens is when you are able to present things in those terms, because a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, okay, investor will want to put money into my company because it's safe, because they are sure to win, or at least they are sure to minimize their risk. But what I quickly realized is that the startup game is almost the opposite. It's more like I'm betting on this founder because there is a 5% chance they'll build something, that could turn into $1 billion company, into $1 billion opportunity. And I want to buy into that 5% chance, right? It's like buying an option for $1 billion or euros at 5 or 10% odds. And I know when I do that, that 95% of the time, it's not going to work out. So when you pitch your company, your startup, I think a lot of people make the mistake of framing it like there's an 80% chance that this will work and you will 3x your investment. But the reality is, if we're talking about risk capital, you should be saying, no, there's a 5 to 10% chance this will work, but if it does, it will 1000x. Again, we are talking about startups and risk capital here. So for example, imagine you are a VC, a risk investor, a venture capitalist, and I come to you and I say, listen, this guy, Joe, might just be the one who will dominate the humanoid robot market. He has the potential to be one of the top 5 players in the world in that field. But here's the thing, you don't know, right? It's such a long shot because he's just getting started. There are only 5 people in the company, but he's incredibly well positioned to be in the future top 5. Now, it's possible this market might not even exist in the future. Humanoid robots, we dream, we dream big, but maybe it's like flying cars back in the day, right? It might never actually happen. But as a risk investor, you think like, okay, damn, if that Joe, if he pulls it off, it's 1,000x return for me. So it's a bet I'm totally prepared to lose, because if it works, it's gonna explode, okay? It's gonna skyrocket the value of my fund. And you would prefer that versus someone who comes to you and says, I'm opening a chain of restaurants and, it will 3x your initial investment. Sure, I mean, it might work. It's restaurants. There's a low risk. Something like, I already have 5 locations and I'm planning to open 30 more. But it's not the same kind of asset. That's a completely different type of investment. You would go to a different kind of investor for that. So I would say, and also, I mean, what if you are not a startup investor? Right? What if you have something more conservative to pitch? Well, the idea is everything that I'm telling you now about optionality and upside is the total opposite. So I'm going to tell you how you need to embed a few cues in your pitch, but it's the total opposite that you need to do if you are not a startup, if you are not aiming for risk capital, and if you can back it up, of course. So back, I would say, to the main point. People who pitch like this, the restaurant type, it's 80% short, 3 times your return, which is the default reflex. If you pitch like this to investors who are only looking for optionality, you're completely missing the mark. So not all investor profiles are the same, right? If you pitch risk to a conservative, your chances of securing funding are, I don't know, 1 in 1,000. And if you pitch guaranteed steady results over time to a risk investor, same odds. So if you pitch a startup, you pitch optionality, you pitch upside. Of course, it's not only about pitching, I would say, big numbers and bold promises. You need to back it up. The moment you have signs, little indicators that suggest that you could become the new standard or a new standard, that's when things get exciting for investors. So, for example, I'm not going to name the company I've worked with yet, but let's say your pitch is, we have the potential to be the OS, the operating system on which French or Belgian or German small and medium businesses run their operations, run their business. There are what? 2 million small and medium businesses in France alone, I think. So if you become their operating system and everyone manages their business through your solution, or even if it's just 10% of them, that's huge. Okay, that's massive optionality here, right? So, and of course, it's going to require tons of modules and partnerships and integrations. And, there are thousands of ways it could crash and fail. But if it works, ka-ching, jackpot, right? So as an investor, you are buying this option. And in your pitch and your vision, you need to show as many signals as possible that prove, or at least I would say suggest, that there's a real chance this could work. That you've got people adopting your product, people who love it, opinion leaders who are talking about it, and so on and so on. So the idea is, how many cues can you embed? And the more you show these kinds of proofs, the more investors will think, okay, this guy or this gal is well positioned, right? If this market is ever gonna take off in the future, they are in a great position to be the ones who are gonna dominate it, or at least grab a fair share of that market, versus anything or anyone else already out there. And that is the key. Okay, you have that optionality, and again, we're talking about the startup world here, but the principle is solid. Okay, it can absolutely be recycled into more traditional industries too. It's just that it has to be balanced off, you would say. Now, obviously, in the case of the founders I've worked with, the equity story, as we call it, is one where we are dealing with a Series A round. So at that point, especially in Europe, you usually already have proof and indicators of a reasonable market fit, at least. But I think it's really interesting to talk about how to raise seed money. How to test the idea, evaluate the market potential, how to gather evidence, the first proof points that you need to secure your initial capital, the first 200K, the first mil. So in a nutshell, if I was in that position, I would say here is what I would do. I would say if you have an idea, if possible, validate it with a landing page. You have an idea, validate with a landing page. So for those who don't know what a landing page is, it's quite simple. A landing page is a simple one-page website that's laser focused on a specific problem or on a specific theme, and its only goal is to convert visitors into prospects or leads, or maybe sometimes even clients, by driving them to one specific action: booking a call, requesting a quote, or even making the goddamn purchase. So, of course, to build such a landing page, this means you have to have a deep understanding of your target audience. You need to build a very detailed client avatar, understand their pain points, their problems, their frustrations, their dreams, their hopes, their lifestyle, their interests, their values, the psychographics, and of course the basics, right? The basic demographics as well. What's the gender, typical gender, age, income. And so once you have nailed that avatar, and I insist on the nailed because it's crucial, once you have nailed that, start with a landing page, a website that talks to that avatar. And the goal here is to test, you would say, the market's appetite for your idea. And even if it's a software idea and you haven't started coding yet, it doesn't really matter. You run Google ads, social media ads, you create a great video, you pitch the idea, you push it hard out there and see if people are genuinely excited enough to buy. So that's one, you build a landing page. Two, if possible, try to see if they will actually pay for it. And you can do this, I would say, in two ways. You either have them click that button and then you show something like service not available yet message, when they click the buy button, or you actually charge their card and then you refund them afterward. I personally would highly recommend the second option, charge their card, because it's the best way to see if people are really willing to pay. And then you refund them with a message like not available yet or temporarily unavailable, but you refund quickly, immediately. Another great hack is you make them buy, you charge their card, and you collect their phone number. And when they buy, you call them. You pick up your phone and you call them. Once they've made the purchase, you just call and you explain the situation. You let them know the reimbursement is already underway, because people like that. Trust me, I've tried it I've tried it out in other businesses and contexts, but they like that. And you tell them that you're currently testing the market. You thank them for their trust, the basic commercial stuff. You can maybe let them know that they will get a 50% discount when the product becomes available. But it's not calling them just to say that. The key is use this opportunity to survey them. Ask questions to better understand who they are, what triggered their interests, what are their expectations, any insight that can help you refine your product and refine your pitch. Maybe even interview them, like that's something that you can use in your pitch deck. People saying, yeah, I bought this because ABCD. If you tell it, it might be true. If someone else tells it, it's already stronger. So that's 3. And I would say 4, once you've confirmed the market, that the market shows real interest, and you've confirmed the pain point is real, what you then do is you build a prototype or an MVP, as they call it, the minimum viable product. And then you launch. And if the business model allows, of course, but here's the thing, you will always be in a stronger position if you are already generating revenue, right? It gives you leverage when it comes to raising funds. Now, step 2, once you have done all of that, you've tested the market appetite, you maybe are generating already money, the question becomes, how do you find your first investors, right? The founding circle. And I would say the trick here is pretty simple. Ask around. Start with your network, even if it's a small one. Okay, you would often be surprised, who knows who? Who knows private investors? Who knows someone who's already been through this process? Or knows someone that knows someone, the 1, 2, 3 layers of your network. And if, for example, someone knows someone that has already been through that process, you call them, you pay for lunch or coffee, you ask for advice, you ask for contacts, maybe even if you have a good vibe for introductions. Who knows, if they're already further down the road, they might even give you some seed money. See if they can connect you with the right people, or at least point you to the right direction. Now, if you're considering, going down the route of VCs, business and angels, or institutional investors, don't just reach out through their website. Okay, don't just go to the contact form or sending a cold email like, I have an amazing idea, please let's talk, right? Usually you won't get, it won't get you very far. At best, you will start the filtering process with analysts and junior associates in their firm. And let's also be honest, what I've heard many times is you will often be ignored or snubbed if you're not introduced by someone they trust. Just think about from their perspective. I've just been interrupted by a huge group of people snowing off track. So that happens. But they just get so many inquiries. That's where we were. And I would say a side note, maybe for the current situation, is the market is starting to turn around a little bit. At least that's what I hear. So I would say that there are today more investors than serious candidates for their money. So if your idea is good, something I would say, or even if it's not actually, apply to Y Combinator, aka, it's also known as YC. It's one of the most influential and well-known startup accelerators in the world. I think they are behind Airbnb, Dropbox, Stripe, and many, many more. And the good news is anyone can apply. Okay, it's hyper competitive, but there is no need for prior success. Anyone can apply. Of course, YC, they look for big, bold ideas that solve real problems. So they will prioritize startups that address large markets, or that are working with innovative technology that has some leveraging potential. So I would say try it out, see how far you will go. And I would say that one of the other side benefits is when you are prepping for YC, it will also get you ready for the rest of your journey. So Y Combinator, like the letter Y, YC. Now, back to reaching out to your VCs and investors. As I was saying, don't go through their website. Find the partners' emails and reach out to them directly. Again, you need to understand the dynamic here. We're talking about people that are incredibly busy on one hand and constantly harassed, you could say, on the other hand. So your message, when you reach out, needs to be short, to the point, intriguing, engaging. And something else is that so many people get discouraged by this process, but I would say don't be fooled, okay? You may have a great idea. You may maybe have one of the best ideas. The world doesn't know it yet. So here I was thinking that, going off track would buy me some peace, but no. I was interrupted again. So I tend to get lost now in my train of thought, but I think, what I was saying is don't be, I would say, fooled, okay, when it comes to fundraising. So many people get discouraged when they don't get the immediate result, but fundraising is and will remain a statistical game. It's a numbers game, okay? The first few no's you will get, what will usually happen is your ego is gonna start tripping. You will think like, I must be the problem, or my product must be the problem, or maybe there is no market fit after all. And it could be, okay? Never completely dismiss this idea. Never fool yourself the other way around. But often it's not the problem, okay? It's just that you haven't reached out to enough people yet. You haven't had enough conversations. You haven't pitched enough investors yet. And this is where having proof, of traction, revenue, market validation, having proof ahead can really optimize and maximize your odds. Okay? If you can say, I've tested the market, we're already generating some cash, this is what we have as results, I would say, that will optimize your odds. So most, I would say, European entrepreneurs I've talked to and who've successfully raised money, they will all tell you the same story. They met with 20, 30, 40 investors before closing a deal. And, again, since many will never even reply to you, this gives you an idea of the amount of outreach that must be done. So go all in with this. Don't approach this as a one by one thing. I've sent an email to this one, now I'm gonna wait. No, don't wait for an answer before moving to the next. Go broad. Broad means reach out to as many as you can, but also go deep. That's the thing. You go 2D here. You go broad, you reach out to as many as you can, but you go deep. Don't be generic. Okay? Don't send generic crap out there. Study each fund, study each investor. Find out who they've invested in. Reach out to those founders. Connect with them and interview them. Learn from their experiences. Learn from any source and use those insights to tailor your pitch. Right? You took a bet on them, we this. So think of it like a sales funnel. Again, numbers game. You might have 200, 300 outreaches, 40 first meeting, 10 second meetings, and then maybe 3 serious discussions. And then, if you are lucky, you will get a term sheet, or maybe even multiple term sheets, but already if you get one. So the key really is compress time. Don't spend a year looking for money. Go parallel, not sequential. Otherwise, what will happen is it will eat up all your productive time and energy. So it's a short burst of, intense and dedicated effort. Now, here's something I would say I understood from, this experience I've just been through. Funds, how can I put that politely? But funds or investors, they're often like flirts, or teases. So they don't know if they want you yet, so they will hype you up. They will keep you engaged as much as possible to make sure that you stay in their process. Only to later maybe say like, oh, actually, no thanks. And that's just a game. A few founders have already told me that, two founders told me that actually, that after the third or fourth meeting they had, they called their friends or family, like they went crazy. It's done. We got it. And then, the funds just stopped taking their calls. Often they won't even bother, to tell you they're out or the why. And again, it's just like sales. If a prospect stops answering, they're just not interested. Move on. I don't say that you don't need to reconsider them at some time, further down the road, to schedule a later follow-up, or maybe go back to these funds when you're in your Series A or Series B. But yeah, move on. Broad, deep, intense effort. It shouldn't take a year. So I would say there you have it, a snowy crash course on fundraising. So I hope you enjoyed it, that you got some value out of it. And now I would say, let me go warm up a bit and just hit that slope. Thanks for watching.